welcome back. By all accounts, Surviving Picasso is a pretty dreadful film. It stars Anthony Hopkins as the lecherous artist whose passion for women resulted in some of the greatest art of the century. One of those women he painted was the great Malaysian beauty Sharmini. It was not only Picasso who found Sharmini's face so fascinating. Annigoni, Augustus John, and the sculptor Jacob Epstein were all inspired by her. Her social circle included Aldous Huxley, Arthur C. Clarke, Charlie Chaplin, and Stravinsky. Sharmini has just written her first novel. What I want to know, looking back, has her beauty got in the way of her other achievements, which were considerable? Now, Sharmini, you were always not only described as a great beauty, but everybody who knew you said one of the cleverest and wittiest and everything women there are. In a way, was being a great beauty a slight nuisance? It opened doors for you, of course, but you're only now known for having been a great beauty.
I hope not. I really do hope not. There are an awful lot of editors who've used my work. I've written many cover stories for the Telegraph Magazine, among others, the Los Angeles Times. No, I'd hate to think that that's all I was remembered for. I should be dead by now. I mean, this is 100 years ago.
Not 100 years ago.
100 years ago.
Well, I'm 100 years old.
Well, you saw me 100 years ago.
Yes, exactly. I was just saying just before the break that I was taken by my penniless boyfriend to Ceylon-born for the first time. Real glamour, and he'd really saved up and everything. And we went to Ceylon-born, and I thought, yeah, it's quite glamorous. And then I saw Sharmini, and I thought, I am now in the presence of real glamour, because Sharmini's here. Now, one of the things, I'm sorry, we will talk a bit about the past, and partly because it fascinates me.
Yes.
Partly because I always think that, you know, when you were painted by all these incredible men, incredible artists, I had an experience with Dali once, because I was staying with close friends, I think we're mutual friends of ours actually, who owned a monastery near Cadaqués.
The Guinnesses.
That's right.
Yes.
And I was a young girl there, and we went down to Dali's place, and he said he wanted to paint me. He was going to take me into another room to see me in the light, and dropped his trousers. Would you like to see the real Dali? Because I howled with laughter and ran. Now, I thought, my modest experience of a great artist who wanted to paint me, did you find it an awful nuisance that they were always presumably trying to get into your bed as well as do your face?
With one exception, and I will not name him.
Oh, go on.
None of the others. No, I will not. No, I will not.
Still alive?
No, dead.
Oh.
Dead. With one exception, none of them did. You know, it's the curious thing was that I don't know what it was, but not one of them did. I don't expect anybody to believe me, but it happens to be the truth.
I'm not saying you succumbed, Sharmini.
No,
I'm just saying you didn't have any running around
No, they didn't
furniture.
even make any... I mean, what's wrong with me? Maybe somebody will ring up and tell me what's wrong with me.
Now, how did... I mean, you were born in Malaysia, is that right?
I was born in Sri Lanka by accident. My mother was visiting her mother. I was brought up between Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Europe, and England.
Now, what were your family? Were they diplomats?
They were partly diplomats, part of the family diplomats, and the rest are doctors.
And then how did you get into this intelligentsia artistic set?
Very easy. I mean, it happened two ways. One was that it was a very small one. When I first came to England, which was in the 50s, there were very few people from my part of the world, even fewer when my father came. So when my father came, and a great linguist, he spoke 12 languages, he was a surgeon, brilliant. And if I tell you that when you went to Heidelberg, one of the first people he met and made friends with was a man called Pacelli. Who does he become? A pope, you know. So the world was a very small world, and my aunts were, my uncles were ambassadors and people like that. And so I kept, you know, it was open sesame for me in many, many areas of life. But the artists themselves I met in a variety of ways. Annigoni, for instance, was very interesting. I was a medical student, but I had already won a prize for writing short stories. In fact, laughingly, it was called the Somerset-Maugham Short Story Award, but it was only offered in Malaysia through the Straits Times, because the man there was a great friend of Somerset-Maugham's who had spent a lot of time in Malaysia, as you know. And so I won that short story competition. One of the prizes was to be able to write your own column. I did all of two before I came over to England. So there was a hunger in me not to let any one gift left behind. There's one parable that always haunted me, the parable of the 10 talents. I always thought, I'm not going to get up there and have someone say, what did you do with that one? And so I said to a friend of mine, I want to write. So he said, well, everyone starts off by being a journalist. So he took me to an editor.
Some of us stay there.
And he said, right, what can you do? And I said, I don't know, how about painters? Because I'd already been painted by Augustus John, who I'd met through family friends.
I bet he was the one who gave you trouble. He gave everybody trouble. Come on, Johnny.
And Nicholas Egon, who had included me in this wonderful book of his, which is, I think, what started it all, The Great Beauties of Our Age. And he said, we can't do a series of 5, which I would like you to do, without having Annigoni in it. And I was chickening out. I said, I don't know the man. He said, no, you've got to find out. So I did.
So he said, I'm going to paint you.
Well, he would not let my photographer, believe it or not, was Tony Beecham. You know, was one of the great photographers at the time, who had just photographed me. And I said, would you like to take a picture of Annigoni? Because I'm going to do a story on him if I get to him. And he said, yes. When I was chickening out, Tony drove me there, sat in the car, sent me upstairs, and this voice boomed, come upstairs. Upstairs was 6 flights to the studio. And he walked around me, literally, round and round me. And
examining you like a sort of piece of merchandise.
Yes, and I said, look, I must ask you this. He said, that is already written about. And every question I says, you can look it up in the cuttings. And finally I said, well, listen, I must have an interview, and I have a photographer downstairs when you have sat for me for a portrait.
So
that was how it started.
That's how you met Annigoni. Then how did you meet Picasso?
Because I was in the south of France staying with friends, and really I was in a pair of slacks with my hair pulled up in a little funny little ponytail, and he did a drawing of me. Then next time he saw me, I was in sari and looking rather splendid, he said, and then he did me as one of the playing card queens. And
now I gather he had a sort of slight rivalry with Annigoni.
Yes, he did.
So what happened there?
It was very funny, because this time I was just visiting him, because by this time we'd made friends. I couldn't really speak much with him, because I spoke neither Spanish nor French. And he was doing a little sketch of me, when a friend came up and said, aha, you know, she's defecting from you. She is going to sit with this huge painting that this man Annigoni is doing. He said, ooh, Annigoni, you know. So they had a magazine with some pictures of Annigoni in it, and his work. Do you know, I was writing to my parents, because while he was sketching me, I was writing to my mother and father. Grabbed this thing I was writing on, turned it round, took my eyebrow pencil out of my bag, and drew what he called an Annigoni, and it was exactly in the style of Annigoni. It was quite amazing. Then he added another eye and another head and 2 arms, and I said, it's my thing, and I'm taking it with me. It was, you know, one of those...
So you've got an original Picasso?
I have it on a Basildon bond, on the back of a Basildon bond.
Did you like him? Do you think there was some fair... I mean, there was a sort of rather ghastly biography done of Picasso by Ariana Stasinopoulos Huffington.
Who had never met him.
Who'd never met him. I mean, did she ever ask you about your views on him? Or
no, I know
else?
her, but she probably didn't know that I knew him,
yes.
so she didn't ever ask me.
Was he
But
the
I
monster?
gathered she went to the best source, and that was to François Gillot.
Yes, now, of course, she's
yes.
the subject of the film, which
Yeah.
you haven't seen yet. Will you go and see it, do you think?
I probably will go and see it. But, Anne, you know, what I'd like to do is get off all this, and
Of
get
course.
off the looks,
Okay.
and get off the
Now,
thing,
you-
and onto something, because the 2 previous guests you had were, especially the second one, was very close to my heart in something, not all, but some things, because it's something I've been on about, batting on about, apparently all by myself. Every time I'm asked for an interview, I say, on condition, you will also include these things, and it's the quality of life.
Now, are you talking about the quality of moral life?
I think it has to start somewhere, and I think this is a very essential part of it. And I'm very frightened of the way, I mean, I've been talking about this for the past 15, 20 years. And one of the key things, and I'm very glad this is being taken up now, I think, by every party, and that is that teachers must be reinstated into the position they once had in society. You know, teachers were once very honored people. You know, the word master, magister, maestro, this was a great title
is
to
this
have.
partly because your origins were Far Eastern, where in Asian society there is this respect for learning?
There's great respect for learning, and will always go on being so. And I think it is there, even in this age of sort of short sound bites on television. I think people, do you look at the number of people who watch game shows, people who never liked learning, but who watch quiz shows, and they say, "Oh, I knew the answer to that," and they sit on the next one and say, "I knew the answer to that," and they watch Countdown and think, I can add, I can do clever things."
I remember arguing with the teacher, who was one of the rather progressive things, that you shouldn't cram people with facts. I said, why has the most successful game on earth virtually been Trivial Pursuits? Because that is full of facts, and children, adults, grannies, we all love facts.
And not only that, more importantly, I think people like to feel, I know that too. I can take part. I mean, I can really ring up and say, can I be on the program? Because I think I stand a chance. This is one of the reasons why so many of the quiz programs, the more intelligent ones, have gone on for so long.
Yes.
But I do believe that we've come to a point now when we must think seriously of reinstating the quality of the people who will go in. And I'm not in any way saying that the teachers who are there now are not of great quality. They probably want to contribute and want to do something. But with the exception of sort of getting to be a don at Oxford or Cambridge, you know, that we are not making them the centre of society. I know society has now become this huge, massive thing that nobody seems to know where they are. And this is why I think people are splitting up into smaller groups where they feel they have some identity.
Now, you've just written a novel. Is that going to be your new career?
Well, let me tell you that novel writing has been, as you know, I've done journalism, I've done documentary films, and even won the odd prize, but novel writing has eluded me so far. And I'm determined to do it. And the curious thing was I had told one little story about one part of my life to Lynn Reed Banks, who's a great friend. And she rang me up saying, can I write about this? And I said, no, I'm writing it at the moment. So that's what I'm doing.
Thank you very much indeed, Sharmini. It's been great seeing you, and I'll always remember Grindporn.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to all my guests, Matthew, Paris, and Anne Atkins. And that's all for today. Nita Mann joins you tomorrow, and I'll be back same time next week. Until then, goodbye.